Science!
Welcome to another episode of our spooky science series. This time, let's get ready to howl at the moon as we dive into the origins, the transformations, and the real-world explanations behind the stories of those furry shapeshifters. The Science of Werewolves. As always, if you dig this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and check out our full Halloween science playlist for more. The idea of turning into a wolf, referred to as lycanthropy, as either a curse or a medical affliction, has been around in European folklore for ages and can even be traced back further into classical antiquity. A handful of references to men changing into wolves can actually be found in the myths of the ancient Greeks. The famous historian Herodotus wrote about a tribe of people called the Neuri, and they would all be transformed into wolves once a year for several days. There are also accounts of Zeus visiting King Lycaon of Arcadia, who tested the god to see if he was truly powerful. His plan backfired, and he angered Zeus, who turned him into a wolf as punishment. The interest in and the persecution of werewolves reached a fever pitch with the case of Peter Stump in 1589. Peter was a wealthy farmer in Electorate of Cologne, in which is now Germany. Stump was accused of being a serial murderer and a cannibal, confessing to killing and eating 2 pregnant women and 14 children, one of which was his own son. Under torture of being stretched upon a rack, Peter confessed to practicing black magic since he was a boy, and that the devil gave him a special belt that allowed him to turn into a wolf. He was horrifically executed on October 31st, 1589, flayed upon a wheel, his arms and legs broken so he couldn't return from the grave, and then beheaded and burned upon a pyre. As a warning against other werewolves, the local authorities erected a pole with the torture wheel and the figure of a wolf, and Peter Stump's own head placed on top. Before the Middle Ages in Europe, lycanthropy was sometimes considered to be a rite of passage of a warrior, a kind of invite the spirit of the wolf idea to make the warrior stronger and more vicious. In pagan practices, to become a werewolf meant that you had entered a pact with the devil, which is a completely different outlook. Early Christian writings also had references to werewolves, with St. Augustine retelling an account that mentions witches as well. In his 5th century book, The City of God, St. Augustine writes, "It is very generally believed that by certain witches' spells, men may be turned into wolves." In fact, early accounts of werewolves were lumped into accounts of witches and witchcraft. Trials of supposed werewolves originated in Switzerland in the early 15th century, and lycanthropy was mentioned in some of the later witchcraft trials, with either people transforming into a wolf, or wolf riding or wolf charming. In 1651, the trial of Hans the werewolf was a typical example of this strange occurrence. Hans was brought before the court of Idavir in Estonia, accused of being a werewolf when he was 18. He confessed he had hunted as a werewolf for 2 years and had been able to transform into the wolf by meeting a strange man in black. So the courts drew the obvious conclusion. The man in black had to be Satan, and dubbed his confession one of black magic, branding Hans a witch and sentencing him to death. Now, there are various methods associated with becoming a werewolf outside of making a deal with the devil. Some of the earliest beliefs were that if you removed your clothing and wore a belt or robe of wolfskin, you would be transformed. In other cases, a magic salve or potion was used to cause the person to turn into a wolf. It wasn't until modern interpretations of werewolves in fiction did the idea of lycanthropy being either hereditary or an infectious disease come about. So the most famous trait we know today, that if you are bitten by a werewolf and survive, you will then become one, is a fairly recent idea. This is also true for perhaps the most commonly known way of stopping a werewolf, the use of silver bullets. The first time this attribute was ever seen on screen was in The Wolfman, the 1941 movie starring Lon Chaney Jr. When monster worlds collided for the first time on screen in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman in 1943, Lon Chaney Jr. reprised his werewolf role alongside Bela Lugosi's Frankenstein's monster. This movie showed the first time the full moon was used to cause the transformation to werewolf. Yet, this idea of involving the moon lends to our first scientific dissection of these traits that are associated with becoming a werewolf. First of all, the connection between the moon and wolves has been around even longer than the idea of becoming a werewolf. Some examples are mentions in Norse mythology of Skoll and Hati, two wolves who would chase the sun and the moon through the sky in the hopes that they will devour them. They never do, but this is why we have day and night. There is even a Native American legend from the Seneca tribe that tells of how the wolf sang the moon into existence. But in reality, wolves do not howl at the full moon. Canine experts have found no connection between the phases of the moon and the howls of wolves. Rather, wolves howl at night because they are nocturnal creatures, and they point their head towards the sky when they do to ensure that the sound carries farther, as their howls can be either a warning or a rally cry to the rest of the pack. But the idea that the moon can cause a transformation in someone, there might actually be some scientific proof behind it. Not a transformation into another animal, but that Earth's natural satellite might actually affect our mood and sleep patterns. You might have heard the saying that all the crazy people come out during a full moon. In fact, the term lunacy actually comes from the Latin word lunaticus, which translates to moonstruck. This belief that the moon affects our very psyche has been around for a while, and while there is no concrete evidence to support it, there are some scientific parallels we can assume. The moon used to be a beacon in the sky during earlier times before light pollution, and when the moon was full, it signified a time for groups and tribes to congregate. Also, the light of a full moon can affect the sleep patterns of people, and not just from the idea that there is more light in the sky. A sleep laboratory study in 2013 found that people took 5 minutes longer to fall asleep and slept 20 minutes less overall during a full moon. And as you probably know, any change in your sleep pattern can definitely affect your mood. Psychiatrist Thomas Weir published a paper in 2017 describing 17 patients with rapid cycling bipolar disorder, and every patient showed a regularity in their episodes. Those illness cycles were eerily linked to the cycles of the moon. He found those patients showed mood swings and switched from depression to mania and back again following a 14.8-day cycle, and some following a 13.7-day cycle. The moon and its gravitational pull affects the tides of the ocean, and it's well documented. The cycle of those tides runs like clockwork. The spring neap tide cycle happening every 14.8 days, and the declination cycle happening, you guessed it, every 13.7 days. Spooky, right? Are we being affected by the moon on a biological and psychological level? Studies are still being done to this day, but let me ask you this. Have you ever felt different during a full moon? Like maybe your mood has shifted? On the other side of the whole werewolf debate is the well-documented medical condition, clinical lycanthropy. There have been many cases where a patient has suffered from this mental disorder, believing that they were a wolf or that they can transform into one. Between 1520 and 1630 in France alone, there were over 30,000 cases of people believing that they suffered from lycanthropy. While this condition is much rarer today, over 40 cases have been reported in medical literature since 2004. Lycanthropy is widely accepted to be linked to other mental disorders, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and depression. But that doesn't quite explain why these people wholeheartedly believe that they can transform into a werewolf. Another medical condition linked to werewolves is called hypertrichosis. This is when an abnormal amount of hair grows on the body. It can be located to a single place or completely cover the affected person. Several circus sideshow performers who suffered from this disease found fame because of it. Julia Pastrana traveled throughout the United States during the mid-1800s as the very famous Bearded Lady. And Fyodor Yevchev, better known as Jojo the Dog-Faced Boy, was a Russian sideshow performer who rose to fame traveling alongside P.T. Barnum's circus sideshow. Even though there are some scientific parallels to werewolves, and of course, it's scientifically impossible to prove a human body could completely transform into a giant wolf and back without incredible trauma and death, there are some accounts that still go unexplained. In April of 1971, residents of Port City and Plateau, Alabama, reported strange encounters with a wolf woman. Roaming the streets at night, this half-wolf, half-woman creature terrorized the towns for 10 days, but no one was hurt or assaulted. Over 50 calls to the local newspaper about the strange wolf woman came in throughout the week, and to this day, there is no explanation. The strangest case, however, has to be the Wolf Girl of Devil's River. In 1835, John Dent and his pregnant wife Molly were living in a cabin in southwest Texas near Devil's River. The night Molly went into labor, there was a severe thunderstorm, and John rode to a Mexican goat ranch in nearby Pecos Canyon to get help. He told the ranch hands where his wife was, but then was immediately struck by lightning and killed. When the ranch hands finally made it to the location John had told them, they found Molly dead, apparently from childbirth. But the child was nowhere to be found, and there were fang marks on Molly's body and wolf tracks all around. 10 years later, a boy living near Del Rio, Texas, reported seeing a creature with long hair covering its features, and it looked like a naked girl attacking a herd of goats in the company of a wolf pack. About a year after that, a Mexican woman saw an unclothed girl and 2 large wolves devouring a goat. The local Apache tribes at the time were also reporting that a child's footprints and handprints were sometimes found among wolf tracks along the river. So a hunt was organized by local cowboys to find and capture the girl, and they actually did just that, finding her to be covered in hair and exhibiting wild mannerisms. They tried to detain her in a local ranch, but as night fell, she started to howl from her locked room, summoning a large pack of wolves to the area. In the confusion, she was able to escape from the cowboys, and she was spotted a few more times in the following years, and then she apparently vanished forever. Werewolves and the idea of lycanthropy have entered into our imaginations for centuries. While science is here to say that the transformation from human to animal is impossible, the monster still pops up from time to time, whether in TV or in movies, or in unexplained sightings of the creatures. So the next time the moon is full, take a moment to listen for a howl on the wind, and truly listen to your own mind. Because what if you yourself start to feel a little different in the moonlight? Once again, if you like this episode, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and check out our full Halloween science playlist for more exciting episodes.